Hi everyone, welcome back to the Toffee Blues, your source for all things Everton. My name's Stephen, and today I'm happy to say I'm joined by Mike from the Unholy Trinity podcast. Mike, thanks for coming on and joining us, mate, again.
No problem at all, mate. Looking forward to having some
Always
kind of
nice to have you
positive,
on the channel. Yeah.
some kind of positive conversation.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this one will be a bit more positive than some of the other content that we do this week. We're going to be talking a bit about the whole transfer window, the whole summer in general. Of course, some people a little bit of negativity towards it, but there is some good stuff in there. So we'll kick it straight off with arguably the best signing that we've made this summer. I think a lot of Evertonians will agree. Tim Igbunam, £9 million from Aston Villa. He's been so important, hasn't he? The first few games of the season, even if they haven't been results that have gone for us.
Yeah, I think he's shown what he's all about. You know, he's come in on a deal that was apparently in relation to making sure that we meet PSR and Villa meet PSR. A player we knew very little about, let's be honest. You know, had a bit of game time last season under Unai Emery. Had a good season on loan at QPR, I think it was the season before, but knew little about him. And obviously with Onana going, people were looking at that position as a key position to replace. But you know, Tim's come in and I think done particularly well. You know, we've seen him. You know, he tired a bit at the weekend, understandably. You know, he's a young kid. He goes full throttle. His energy's terrific. He's great in the tackle. You know, he drives forward with the ball particularly well, and pleasantly surprised is probably the best way to describe the signing and the impact that he's had in the first 3 or 4 games. And a player now that we're looking at, who at the moment you can't really take out. He's been one of the shining lights in what's been a disappointing start of the season.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Another one who came in, who I think was a bit of a given going into this season, was Jack Harrison. We weren't quite sure if it was going to be a loan or a permanent one after this campaign last season. I know he split a bit of opinion because I quite liked what he did for the team last season, but a lot of people were saying, you know, he shouldn't be a player that we were looking at signing again for 24-25. What's your opinion on not just this season, but as a whole on him as a player?
I think last season he'd probably say himself it was a bit disappointing, more so because of the fact, you know, we started the season injured. It took him a little while to come into the match day squad. It was a medium term injury, hip injury, wasn't it, which kept him out of for quite a few months. So he came in at a difficult time really at the club. Probably didn't have the impact that we thought he'd have, and maybe he thought that he would have. But I think it was a common sense signing really. The fact that it was another loan deal for another 12 months, not a permanent, and there's no massive outlay. The manager likes him. He knows what he's all about. Knows what his game is. You know, he's got decent work rate, and I think, you know, in our most recent game against Bournemouth, we saw what Jack Harrison can do. Probably his best performance, maybe since he's come into the club. To be honest, I think he had a good impact on the game. He went at players. He drew the foul. He went past players. He caused a few issues on the day. So I think it was a common sense signing, given the fact that we obviously have financial issues. We've got to be clever. A player that the manager knows. So I think that it made a lot of sense to make that deal happen, considering the deal itself was not a gamble. We know the player. It wasn't a huge outlay in terms of any kind of money. So for me, it made perfect sense.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I'm not going to say I don't understand the criticism behind it, in that you know there is definitely more forward thinking, exciting options than him. But as you said, we know the player, and I think at times last season he was really, really good for us. Did the simple things well, and this season again, I think against Bournemouth he did have one of his better games. Moving on to Iliman Ndiaye, obviously £15 million from Marseille, spent time at Sheffield United as well. I've seen quite a lot of Sheffield United fans talking about him quite fondly as well, his time at their club. But if we're gonna talk a little bit about that Bournemouth game on Saturday, which I don't want to do because I've just about put it out in my head, he was the shining light in that game, wasn't he? I mean, I haven't seen a player light up an Everton team like that. During the game, I was saying it, I'm cautious to go too much into it, but he reminds me a lot of Steven Pienaar in the way he'd take on the ball, and he could stick to the wing, but he could come inside as well. He's going to be really important for us this season. It's really important to keep him fit.
I think the thing is when he was brought in, the word from Marseille and his season in France was that he struggled because he was getting played wide and he likes to play as a number 10. And since he's come in, the managers used him as a wide player. He played left on Saturday. It's quite fluid. You find in the cup game against Doncaster, the three were Lindstrom, McNeil, and Dye were quite fluid and sort of went left, right, central between themselves over the course of the game. But obviously a little bit more discipline on Saturday, and he was just terrific. You mentioned Stephen Pienaar. If he does half of what Stephen Pienaar did at the football club, then he'll have a very, very decent impact on, when he's certainly a player that gets you off your seat, against Saturday, against Doncaster. Some of the things that he was doing, I've not seen a player do that kind of thing since Stephen Pienaar. And he's got a bit more pace than Pienaar. Technically, he looks very good. He draws, the defender. The defenders were petrified of him at the weekend. And to have a player like that who can control the pace, can get you up the pitch, can occupy defenders, can frighten defenders. He's good technically. He's got an eye for goal. He's a totally different kind of number 10 or even wide player than Dwight McNeil, Jack Harrison and Abdoulaye Doucouré. So it gives us a different dimension. So, early days, of course, you don't really see him a couple of times from the off. But, early signs are good. He's only going to get stronger. We spoke to a Sheffield United fan ourselves on our podcast when we signed him, and they didn't want to lose him at all. He was one of the major reasons why they gained promotion to the Premier League, and then he went to Marseille, which was his club. But I think the deal that we got, what was it, in around say £15 million, I think in the end, looks to be a very shrewd bit of business. But early days, let's not get too carried away. But in terms of impact, I think Saturday showed us all what he's all about and what he can do.
Mm-hmm. And then we're going in chronological order here. Right before we went back into the French market, we went to Italy and took Jesper Lindstrom from Napoli. We haven't seen very little of him so far in the first 3 games. We did see a bit of him in the Carabao Cup against Doncaster, and I was quite excited by what he could do. It seemed like he gave us something a little bit different in that he could come inside. He wouldn't hug the touchline as much as someone like Jack Harrison. What's your opinion on that as a signing? Because obviously we can't really judge him too much yet, but I think it's good to have that depth on the wings.
Yeah, the exciting player, judging by what we saw at Eintracht Frankfurt. He had a couple of really good seasons there. Won a European trophy, of course, probably against better sides as well. A trophy which he had no right to win. So he shows you how good that side was and how good he was. He was an integral part of that team, and hasn't worked for him at Napoli, but he went through, I think, 3 or 4 managers over there in that one season. Again, playing out of position a little bit. Different styles of football for 3 or 4 different managers. He's found it hard. I think, from what we've seen so far, a couple of times in a friendly, he looked quite lively, scored a great goal against Preston. Got a chance against Doncaster. I think he struggled. I think it's going to take him a little bit of time, which we need to be a little bit patient with. He's got to get up to speed, the speed of the Premier League, and also the physicality of English football. It's not the same as other parts of Europe, and that's the one thing where Ndai's ahead of him because he's played in this country before, so knows what it's all about. So Lindstrom will take a little bit of time. You've got to be patient, but he's got a bit of pace, and I think once he gets up to speed, once he gets to get a bit more game time, hopefully in the Carabao Cup game against Southampton on the 17th of this month, he gets another chance again to impress. And we see an improvement on his performance from what we saw against Doncaster. But certainly, you look at the option off the bench at the moment, you've got the likes of him, obviously Doucouré, Beto, you've got players to come back in the likes of obviously Chimiti, obviously Mangala's got to get back up. So you've got to come into the squad when he returns from international duty. You've got Brozier to come in, obviously Branthwaite. It's another option off the bench, which makes the squad that little bit stronger and means that if we are chasing the game, there are options, and he's one of those options that we've got. You
just hope that we can utilise them properly at certain points in those games in tough moments. But as soon as you mention one of them there, we'll do the 2 Leon boys together. Jake O'Brien, 16.4 million is the official figure. I know 17 million is the one that's being knocked about a lot on social media. And Orel Mangala spent last year on loan at Nottingham Forest. back at Lyon. He's now come to Everton on a loan with no option to buy. So in terms of O'Brien, that's one that really excited me. Probably my favourite of the summer. Probably, I think that was a really important one to get in and think for the future. Someone who won't take too long to get ready. He's played in European competitions. He's played in France. He's played in the Premier League for Crystal Palace. One that we can probably ease into the squad, and then hopefully at the end of the season he can be a first team player. But he just hasn't had those options, those opportunities yet. With the manager opting to go with Michael Keane over him. To me, it seems. I know it's still very early days, but I'm excited to see him more than anyone else, I think.
Yeah, we've seen little bits, haven't we? We started against Doncaster. I was very surprised at the weekend when we were leading the game that he didn't come on and make up a back five and go three centre halves. Especially the fact that they were throwing crosses in. Someone who's 6'6", good in the air. He would have been ideal for that. But I think we all would have liked to have seen him given the opportunity from the start of the season, given the fact that Jarrad Branthwaite is still injured. He's overcoming surgery. We were here last year, weren't we, where Michael Keane got the nod before we brought Jarrad Branthwaite in, and we started to see a little bit of a defensive improvement. But excited to see what he can do. He's got a great reputation. There were quite a few clubs linked with him. Obviously, as I said, he's a big lad. He seems to be good with the ball at his feet. He's quite happy to try and carry the ball as well, from what I've seen. Scored, I think he was Lyon's second highest goal scorer last season as well. So with us, we've had a reliance in the last sort of 12, 18 months on scoring goals from set pieces. So he'll only add to that. And he's going to become a target for those corners and free kicks that are coming in. So we're excited to see what he can do. But we've got to be given the chance, hasn't he? We've got to get him in there, and the manager's got to stick with him as well. He will, I'm sure, at times make mistakes. He will struggle against certain attackers. But Branthwaite did last season. There were certain games. You go back to Isak, probably is the big one that he struggled with. Even Brozier, when Chelsea came to Goodison, he didn't have an easy day, Branthwaite. So give the kid time. He's only 23 years of age. Big future ahead of him. Decent price tag. But the kind of signing that we should be making with a view to, if Branthwaite moves on next summer, his ready-made replacement then just slots in, and he's been in the club for 12 months and he's settled in. That's the kind of business that we should be doing. So, this season will be very much a bedding season for him. But I do think he needs to be given opportunities, and if he performs well, then he should keep his place.
Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Orel Mangala. I didn't watch too much of him last season at Nottingham Forest, but hopefully he'll be able to strike up a good partnership in the sort of hold midfield role with a player we mentioned before, Tim Eric-Boonham.
Yeah, a deal I think that is a bit of a favour from John Textor by all accounts. There's no loan fee. It was one of those, obviously, Mangala knows English football. He, as you said, he played for Forest. I think it was for 18 months before he moved to Lyon. So it's again another common sense deal, because although we brought Eric-Boonham into the club, we were still a bit short, I think, in that area. We were looking at Calvin Phillips, for example. There was talk of Sander Berger, who we looked at him on loan, and he obviously wanted a permanent deal. He went to Fulham. So we were looking at another body to play in that central midfield area. And, Mangala himself would say that, in his interview, he likes to link up defence and attack. So that tells you he might be a bit of a box-to-box. I'm sure that he can sit. When you've got him, you've got Eric-Boonham, you've got Garner Gay, you've got James Garner. Decore can drop back in there. You've got options now. And he's a player, as I say, he does know the Premier League. He was at a club, he was obviously fighting at the bottom end of the Premier League with ourselves for a time as well in Nottingham Forest. But I think that he's just, again, a clever, a common sense signing, one that we obviously could afford to do because there was no loan fee attached to it. So we've had to be shrewd in our business this summer, and I think all the names that you've mentioned so far, they all present decent business for me, and I think we'll come on to, we'll summarise, of course, but we're not going to do it all in one window, and we can't do it all in one window given our current financial situation.
Mm-hmm. And then Asmir Begovic, a former Everton player, came back on loan. This to me striked as a little, not on loan, sorry, as a free agent. It struck me a little bit, this one, as a deal maybe for him for his future if he does want to go into coaching, because I think he was a solid backup option when he played for Everton. Of course, they've got João Virginia there now, but I feel like there's probably something a bit deeper to this one than him just being another option in goal.
I don't know. I think with Begovic, it's what it allowed the two young lads to go out on loan, didn't it? So when there was the talk came about that he was coming back on a free transfer, but the thought was, well, either João Virginia wants to go and move him on a permanent deal to somebody, because he was talking about that at the back end of last season about getting more game time and being a number one, which he's not going to be at Everton. So as a backup, Begovic would have been fine. He had a full season of QPR last season, didn't do too bad there. Obviously, the age of Begovic, like you say, is he now looking at his next steps? Is he thinking, well, I want to go into the coaching world? We know he's got his goalkeeper schools that he runs with the kids. He's got his own brand of goalkeeper gloves as well. So maybe that's the next thing for him, is looking at that. Will there be an opportunity at Everton? Who knows who's going to be in charge at the end of the season as well? We just don't know what that makeup's going to be. But I just think if it allows the two young lads in Tyra and Billy Crellin to go and play some regular football, then that's great. We've done, I think, particularly well in terms of the loans that we've got our young players this season. Loads of them have gone out to get first team football in the Football League. So Begovic coming in has allowed them to do that. He's currently third choice goalkeeper behind João Virginia and Jordan Pickford, but it's certainly an able deputy if we need him to come in at any point whatsoever over the course of the season.
Well, yeah, and before we go on and talk about those young players that went out on loan, Armando Broja came in on deadline day. One that really surprised me. I thought that it would I thought it was going to be a bit of a Nonto situation where it was always just going to be talk and never anything more than that. But he did end up moving on deadline day on a loan with an option to buy for £30 million. For me, I think this was quite a smart one. If it is indeed risk free, that a lot of the sources suggest.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's no loan fee attached. We haven't got to pay him until he's in a match day squad, so we're talking mid-October by the looks of things, according to reports. A player who's 22 years of age, you think he's about 30, the number of years he's been around. But you've got to go back to that loan spell at Southampton really to look at him in at the sort of peak of his power so far and what he can actually do. And if people there's a clip floating around on social media of the goals, and he scored 9 goals for Southampton, but they were all different kind of goals. So it wasn't a case of we just scores tap-ins or it's all right foot on the angle. It was a variety of different goals. Some he's making himself, some it's being settled for him. So if he can get fit, it's going to be quite exciting. I think it's a bit of an audition, really. I think with Calvert-Lewin's contract situation in mind, if he comes in mid-October, he's got sort of 2.5-3 months to sort of bed in and show what he can do in that side. If he hits the ground running, scores a few goals, then the club then won't be sort of quite as bad in terms of losing Calvert-Lewin come January. We're going to get some kind of fee for him if he's not signed a new deal. So I think very much if Broja can come in and score a few goals, then the club will let Calvert-Lewin go in January if he hasn't signed a new deal. But it's risk-free, isn't it? We're not paying him until he's in a match-day squad. Where do you see that kind of deal? Now, does that, I was speaking to someone today who's of the thinking that they think, well, you don't see that kind of deal normally, first of all. No loan fee as well. Does it mean then come January, if Chelsea need a striker, Dominic Calvert-Lewin goes to Chelsea? Is that part of the deal? Maybe, who knows? But I'm just hopeful that he can come in, he can have an impact. We know what he's all about, but the important thing is he's got to remain fit. He's had a couple of really bad years with injuries. Even he comes back in pre-season, gets an injury. It's one of them where he seems to be a little bit fragile. So we've got to try and get him through that, and hopefully, we can get him on the pitch and get him scoring goals.
Mm-hmm. And then we'll burst through a couple of these under-21 deals. Amari Benjamin from Arsenal came in as a free agent. He's a Welsh winger, 18 years old. Spent some time on trial at the club last season and scored against Spurs for the under-21s. So again, these are all players that hopefully will go on to do a little bit more. I think there's a lot more work to do in youth academies in this day and age than almost the youth academy is probably what it was brought in to be, in that it's a stepping stone in terms of it being you come in and you immediately get scouted, which is what we sort of seen maybe 15 years ago under David Moyes. We bring in a lot of these players in like European games or cup games, but a lot of these players now end up in the under 21s and you never hear about them until there's sort of whispers of them coming into the first team. Will Tayman from Burton Albion, undisclosed fee. Again, we don't really know much about these players just yet until maybe he can be the next Jared Branthwaite. That's all we're hoping. Francis Gomez from Nigerian team Sporting Supreme on deadline day. Gambian midfielder. He's been loaned out to Lyon. So like you were saying before about the John Textor links, there could be one there. It's all a bit confusing, this one. And then out on loan, we had Onyango going to Stockport, as you mentioned there before. Mike, Harry Tyler, and Billy Crellin both went out on loan to Blackpool and Accrington each. And then we had Campbell to Ross County, Metcalfe to Chesterfield, and Okadonkwo to Salford, who actually won, I think, player of the match last night, didn't he, for Salford City? So any of them that really stand out to you?
Well, I think the thing is with our younger players is, and we've sort of bemoaned this over many years. I think last season we got a lot of this right as well. Is we weren't giving them the opportunity to get the correct loan and go and play man's football. Playing them in the under 21s in the Premier League 2 is no good. They need to go and play in a league where it really matters, where it's competitive. So, as I say, you're playing for promotion. You're playing to stay in the Football League at times. You're playing for what's it called now, the Bristol Street Motors Trophy, things like that. You're against men week in, week out, and that's a really big thing. So I think if you look at the loans that we've done in terms of the players going out, there's been loads of them, which I think is really important, because just sticking them, as I say, in the 21s does them no good. In terms of players coming in and the players who've been loaned out, the aim is of academy players or under 21s, especially this day and age in terms of PSR. We know about that, of course, how important it's become to have homegrown players make a name for themselves in some way, shape or form in league football, and then to be able to sell them and make pure profit on them. That, unfortunately, is the way of the world in football in this country at this moment in time. In the Premier League, it certainly is that way. So, if you can get a player developing and going down the right road and having a couple of good loan spells and, potentially scoring goals, keeping clean sheets, whatever it might be, then league clubs will then put the money with them out there and say, well, he's sure he can do that in, say, League 2 or League 1. So I think it's really important that we give the players the time to go away, to go and learn the trade, to develop, because at the end of the day, it benefits us either they develop and they get to a level that they can be used in the first team squad. That's the first thing. So that can save you tens of millions of pounds on going to buy somebody else. Or, they do particularly well, have a couple of good loans, and then you can sell them for, say, between £5 and £10 million, and that's £5 and £10 million on the books, which is pure profit. So the way the football is nowadays as a business, younger players are really important to that particular model.
Yeah, definitely. I think you see the likes of City and Chelsea, who sort of they buy a lot of these players, then never use them purely just to get around these rules. So, as harsh it does sound, they can be used as a money making scheme. A lot of these players, and like I mentioned, you hit the nail on the head there to what I was trying to say, that youth academies are much less nowadays a place to grow at a club and slowly get yourself into the first team. Maybe like when they used to have reserve teams, the youth academy started out more like a reserve team. Now it's a sort of camp where all these players can sort of sit out and look for moves to Football League 2 and National League and League 1 teams. But yeah, they're the loans that we had for the under 21 players. I think we'll see how they do. Obviously, we have got the loan watch on the channel where we'll watch. We'll see how they do get through the season. We'll get in terms of outgoings. We'll get the two loans out the way in the first. We've got Nail Mopé to Marseille and Mason Holgate to West Brom. Marseille for Mopé. That one, I think was that deadline day. That one.
I think it was the day
500k
before.
loan fee and a 5 million obligation.
Yeah, I mean, goodbye, farewell. It was just, it was never a deal that worked for Everton Football Club, and it was always, he was about 6th or 7th on the list for Frank Lampard in terms of looking for a striker, and they opted for Mopé. And to be fair to him, he's not going to turn down a move where he's probably getting more money. With the best will in the world, to a bigger club, although he was at probably a better club at the time, but to a bigger club, potentially, it gives him more game time. Didn't work because he was never going to fit into the Everton system. So it was always strange. I think what we've seen, we had a decent loan at Brentford last season. So surprising that they didn't activate that buy clause, and I think it was paying around sort of £7 million for him. They obviously wanted to pay a lower fee, so sort of took the chance, and they were in the mix, I think, late on. But Marseille came in. Everton were adamant that there's got to be a loan fee, and then what we'll do is when he's in the last year of his contract, but we have got a +1 on that, so we will basically activate the extra year. So when the deal goes through, the permanent deal goes through, which is an obligation for Marseille, then we activate that extra year, and then we get I think it's going to be around sort of €5.5-6 million. Which, at the end of the day, with the loan fee combined, it's not a bad price for somebody. It'll think more than break even, if not give us a bit of a profit in terms of when we take into account amortization and things like that. But he was never a good fit. I think the back end of his Everton career in terms of the whole thing over the Euston Station. I've got no problem with any players giving it back, by the way, when they're getting stick. I've got no problem with that. But I think when you add fuel to the fire, when you come out with the tweet and start saying this, that, and the other, when you're leaving the football club, there's no need for that. So for me, straight away, we know he's a bit of a wind-up merchant and things like that. He went right down in my estimations. So
you just hope he'd be winding up other teams instead of us.
Well, yeah, exactly right. And at Brentford, that's what he did, and people then go back to when Brighton equalised against us last minute or in stoppage time last season. And, it was all about my captain, Lewis Duncan. You're an employee of Everton Football Club. We were on load at Brentford. So there's no need for any of that either. So I think, he burns his bridges with Everton, and I don't want to see him back anywhere near the football club. So I'm delighted that he's gone. And unfortunately, he didn't conduct himself in the right manner for me.
Well, you're delighted that he's gone. One that I simply can't remain unbiased on is Mason Holgate. I mean, for people of my age, yeah, he signed for the club when I was 14 years old, and every single year he seems to come around again like a bad smell. I don't think I've ever seen him have a good game for us, and his name and everything about him is just synonymous with failure for me. And like I say, I try and remain, I try and keep a bit of journalistic integrity and remain unbiased when I talk about these players. But honestly, this is the one that I'm really happy with, because there was always a little bit of a whisper that he was going to get a shoot in at right back if someone wasn't fit. But I'm absolutely made up that Holgate can now move on and we can go our separate ways. Because for me, he was never going to have the quality. He was never going to have the quality as a defender, at least in this Everton side, to make it for me. What do you think?
Yeah, it was funny with Holgate because obviously there was a time when he signed his new deal under Carlo Ancelotti, and you go back over the responses to the tweet Everton put out, and everyone was fairly satisfied because I think a bit like Ben Godfrey, sort of had his best time under Carlo Ancelotti. At a time when there was no crowds for a long period. So maybe that was a bit easier for certain players. Since then, we've seen him. Last season had two really, really poor loan spells. One at Southampton, one at Sheffield United. Every time he's come in for us, you look at even in pre-season, making mistakes. He didn't look particularly good. At his age now, what is he sort of? Is he 27, 28? Is he maybe a bit older than that? He sort of should be in his peak years, really. I think he is 27, should be in his peak years, and he sort of regressed. He started off pretty well, as I say, had a good time under Ancelotti, and then it just went downhill from there. So a player who's probably most fondly remembered for pushing for Firmino over the horns at Anfield in that cup game, sort of says it all, really. It's someone who, as I say, had a really, really poor concentration span, was prone to a mistake, was a bit of a liability. Always getting booked for silly tackles. Didn't really have much of a football brain, and I don't want to be sort of nasty here, but he just didn't do it in any way, shape, or form in the last sort of 2 or 3 years. And there was a concern because the loans were so poor last season that he'd remain on his decent contract at Everton because nobody wanted him. So I think when it went to deadline day and him going to, at first it looked like he was going to Lyon on a permanent deal. John Textor yet again. I think even John Textor sort of drew the line at Mason Holgate going to Lyon. But that fell through. Then it looked like he was going to Sheffield Wednesday. And then that fell through. And then last minute, West Brom come calling again. Obviously, he's been there before. And he signed for them. So again, I think Everton were just satisfied to get some of his wages off the books. I don't think there's going to be any kind of fee attached to it in terms of loan fee. And that'll be him done with Everton now, assuming that he does see out his whole loan spell and can come back again. But that'll be him done at the football club, and then next summer he'll be gone.
I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion because we sent him on loan out last year to Southampton. He wasn't good enough to play for them. So, I can go back to remaining unbiased now and talking about the other players. That's hopefully the end of that transfer saga, and it's a transfer saga every year, isn't it? Ben Godfrey, that was the one that I was a little bit shocked by. He's got a really good move there to Atalanta. Obviously, he's done really well in the past few years. It's a lovely place to go. And out of all of the defenders, bar Branthwaite and Tarkowski, he was the one that I would have wanted to keep out of maybe him, Keane, Holgate, and all them. Because he played really well the end of last season at right back, I thought. And he could have been the problem to a couple of our... he could have been the solution to one of the right back problems that we've had already this season. But £10 million, obviously, wanted to move on. You can't really argue with that, can you?
I think the thing with Godfrey was, he was a utility defender, wasn't he? So when we've got a situation now where we've got no left back cover besides Ashley Young, but he's also a right back cover. Patterson's injured. He's been injured for quite a while at the hamstring operation, and Seamus Coleman is getting on. So I think Godfrey, in terms of what he offers a squad, as he showed, he said then last season, there was times, you go back to that Burnley game, he was terrific, Burnley away. He had a couple of really good performances over the course of the season playing at right back. So a player that maybe in a different year, if we weren't in the current financial situation that we're in, we'd probably keep him. But I think it shows you that people didn't want to spend money on Michael Keane or Mason Holgate. So it was almost a case of, well, we're going to have to let one of them go to bring some money in. Atalanta came in with a decent fee, to be fair. £10 million, not to be sniffed at. It's a good move for him. Obviously, his first game of the season for Atalanta was in that Super Cup final against Real Madrid. So, really a baptism of fire there. But hopefully he does well. A player who we know came in yet again, had a good season under, or played well under Ancelotti. Got COVID, had long COVID. He really, really struggled. Lost a yard of pace, which obviously was his key weapon and his key attribute. And I think, it's a real shame he never really got back to those heights. But we were starting to see little bits, I think, last season where that pace was coming back a little bit more. So, again, the move made sense from a financial perspective. And like you say, a player that we've utilised in various positions across the back four and could probably really do with it at this moment in time.
Yeah, definitely. And then just before we finish and we read out a couple of fan ratings for the window, the two Villa boys, Dobbin went to Villa and I think he's now gone on loan, hasn't he, to West Brom?
West Brom, yeah.
And then Amadou Onana, who's had a really good start for Aston Villa as well. Just a little thought on them.
Lewis Dobbin, again, it was a necessity, the move, wasn't it? I think a lot of Everton fans probably thought he might get more of an opportunity going into this season because obviously we wouldn't have been able to do a great deal in the transfer window. Again, it was a move of convenience. We had Tim Irabunum come the other way, and you could argue Irabunum's had the better of starts in terms of life because he's a regular at this moment in time. And like you say, Lewis Dobbin's gone on loan to West Brom. And speaking to Villa fans, they thought they would do that with him. They thought they would bring him in. And then Emery will have a little look in pre-season and then get him a loan move because, he needs to play football. He should have gone on loan last season, but he couldn't because we had such a small squad and we had to utilise him. And then he got an injury. So I think the move for him to West Brom will do him good as long as he's getting regular first team football. So again, decent price, of course. We got a decent deal in terms of Tim coming the other way, so certainly not to be sniffed at. And with Onana, everyone will know, listen to our show, I've been a big fan of his from day one. I know he splits opinion and people think he should have done more on Everton, and whatever the reasons were behind that, you knew what kind of player he was and what player he's going to be, and that if you put him into a better side, where he's got probably a little less responsibility, and whether he's being restricted on the dice, I don't know. But watching him for Aston Villa, he looks the player that we all knew that he would be, and he's going to be a miss, of course. But I think it was the sort of right move, wrong time for Onana. You want him to come into a settled side, and he was, only a young player. Don't forget as well. I know he carries himself, I think, like a bit more of a mature player, but only a young player. Got a good price for him. Goes up to 55 million quid. People say, oh, it was too low. I think it was about right, really. I think, to be fair, we've made a decent profit. I know, obviously, Leo got a certain percentage of that, but made a decent profit. Looked good on the books. And we haven't done too bad ourselves in terms of what we've brought in. And maybe the players that we brought in Irabunam and Mangala, are better suited to our football club at this moment in time. But Onana's going to have a terrific career, and I'm sure he'll have a great season at Aston Villa as well.
Yeah, okay. And just before we finish, we did put a tweet out earlier today, just asking fans to rate the window in terms of them from 1 to 10. Couple of people slightly optimistic, couple of people on the not so optimistic side. The 6 out of 10s saying we needed cover at fullback, and I think that was what knocks the window down a few notches for me. Someone said 8, but it'd be a 9 if we actually played them. 6 out of 10. Still, obviously, the Calvert-Lewin situation is still in the air, which is a problem. People talking about needing pacey wingers and left backs and right backs. 7 out of 10 for the funds we had available, and the ownership situation. We were never going to be able to solve all the issues in one window, which is what you just said earlier, wasn't it, Mike? And then, a couple of people talking about how not a lot of the players are going to get a lot of game time. Where it remains to be seen whether the likes of Lindstrom, really bed into the side well over the course of one season. We obviously saw with the Danjuma situation last season that it's not that easy for a lone player coming in nowadays. So, what would you give it if you had to give it out of 10, Mike? Because it's split opinion a bit this window.
Yeah, it has, and I think probably the last day probably helped. I think getting Mangala and Brozier across the line. Okay, 2 loan deals, but 2 extra bodies into that side that will certainly improve the quality that we've got. But I think we've done fairly well, to be fair. If you would have said to everybody at the start of the window or the end of last season, listen, we're going to bring in 8 new faces, they would have been pretty satisfied with that. Let's be perfectly honest. I think what people are saying there is correct. I think the full-back cover is an issue. I think left more than right, in my opinion, is a bit more of an issue. But I think that maybe, we keep on... If I can mute the words pacey wingers from all aspects of my life, then I'd be delighted, because that's all we've heard for weeks and weeks. We were in the market, of course, Nonso being the main one. Wasn't meant to be, but we have brought in Ndai, who started wide. We have brought in Lindstrom, who plays wide, and he's quick as well. So we have got a bit of pace there, and we've certainly got more pace than we had last season. Ideally, yes, we'd have a main winger come in. Who is quick, like a Nonso, young player, decent price tag. It excites everyone, but I don't think we've done too bad. I think I'd probably give Sean Dyche and Kevin Thelwell about a 7.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go with about the same. I think the problem is just getting these players to bed in quickly. But hopefully around, when we hit about Christmas and some of the players, when the side's really cemented in. We saw last season that we began towards the last few months that we sort of hit a bit of a stride with 1-11, and I think that'll be the same again that season. But thanks for coming back on the channel, Mike.
No problem at all, mate. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, of course, and make sure you go listen to the Unholy Trinity podcast. Where's it available, Mike? YouTube and Spotify and it all.
We do YouTube now and again, yeah, but we've got faces for radio, as I always say. So we tend to just keep the audio stuff out. So every week you'll find us on the usual, on Spotify, on Apple, across all your major podcast platforms.
Amazing. So, yeah, and let us know in the comments down below what you thought of the window. Give us your rating from 1 to 10. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Toffee Blues, and I'll see you in the next one.